Sorry for cutting off in the middle of that. So if I finish doing this question, so we were left with 8w is equal to 46. So the opposite of 8 multiplied by w would be to divide. So I'm going to need to divide by 8. And again, what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So that leaves me with w is equal to 5.75. Then we're going to go into questions that have fractions. I know that we're not loving the fractions. It's a little bit difficult sometimes, but we're going to do what we can for this. So I'm going to attempt to actually go to my board and write it out because it's very difficult to do the fractions on the board. So I'll try and speak loudly. Sorry if it cuts off. At this point, you might actually have to look at the board. So if I have a question like this, where 1/2 is being multiplied on the upside, that means the opposite would be to divide by 1/2. And what I do to one side, I do to the other. So we need to remember that when we are dividing, we are actually multiplying by the reciprocal, which gives me 2 out of 2, which actually equals 1. So I'm left with 2w minus 8 is equal to 1. Now I would solve it using the opposite operations, just like those previous. So the opposite of minus 8 is plus 8. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. 2w is equal to 9. I divide by 2 because that is the opposite of multiplying by 2. What I do to one side, I do to the other. W is therefore equal to 4.5. If we did a second one, this one a little bit more complicated because we are going to end up leaving some of it as fractions. So the opposite, once again, of multiplying by 2 out of 3 would be to divide by 2 out of 3. What I do to one side, I do to the other. Division is actually multiplying by the reciprocal, which gives me a fraction of 3 out of 8. So I'm left with 4m plus 6 is equal to 3 out of 8. Now, when we are doing a question like this, I can't have whole numbers and fractions, which means I need to convert them all to be a fraction. So to change something to be a fraction, I can put it out of 1. So in this case, the opposite of adding 6 out of 1 would be to subtract 6 out of 1. And what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. And when I'm working with an equation like this, I need to have a common denominator when it comes to subtracting, which can be 8. So if I multiply by 8, 3 out of 8 minus 48 out of 8 equals negative 45 out of 8. And that is equal to 4m. Okay? So again, I'm going to have to make this a fraction in order to solve it. To make anything a fraction, you put it out of 1. Okay? So the opposite of multiplying m by 4 out of 1 would be to divide m by 4 out of 1. And if I'm dividing by 4 out of 1, I'm actually multiplying by 1 out of 4, which is giving me negative 45 out of 32 is equal to m. Now you can always simplify your equation. 32 goes into 45 one time. I am left with 13 out of 32, and it is a negative. So some of your equations might look similar to this, might be a little bit longer, but the hint is if it's a fraction question, you should be converting things to fractions. So here's the one in your notes. If we just go through that one, not that one, this one. If we go through your notes, I had done it where I converted to fractions and I multiplied it in. So that's the second way we can do it, but I'm going to begin by doing the opposite. Again, opposite of multiplying by 3 out of 4 is dividing by 3 out of 4. What I do to one side, I do to the other. So I am actually multiplying by 4 out of 3, which gives me 4 out of 15. Okay, and this is what I had left. And again, I'm going to convert them so that they're fractions to make things easier. So the opposite of subtracting 4 out of 1 is adding 4 out of 1. What I do to one side, I have to do to the other. When I add, I need a common denominator, which would be 15. So I'm going to multiply by 15. So that gives me 4 out of 15 plus 60 out of 15, which is 64 out of 15 is equal to 2r, or 2 out of 1r. Opposite of multiplying by 2 over 1 would be to divide by 2 over 1, which means I am actually multiplying by the inverse, which equals 64 out of 30. Okay, so I should always be simplifying my answers. 30 goes into 64 2 times. There's 4 left out of 30. Or I can simplify it and say that is 2 and 2 out of 15. So please let me know if this all makes sense to you. I know that the fractions take a lot of time to complete, and that it's not necessarily easy, but it is time consuming. And I would suggest that you take a couple minutes to go through and do a couple questions. Please let me know if you have any other questions or concerns, or if you need more details. Have a great day.